Thank you, and I'm going to try to probably take more questions than comments. As anticipated, that was a extremely intense meeting. We knew that it would be. A lot of information, a lot of process to go through tonight. So tried to gather some thoughts, but also just really want to answer your questions. But, I'll just start by saying that today the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners made a difficult but necessary decision regarding the Crown Event Center. After thorough due diligence, comprehensive analysis, and review of previous and recent community input, this board voted to discontinue the construction of the new facility in downtown Fayetteville and have directed the county manager to pursue development options for renovation to our existing Crown Theater and Arena complex. As you can tell by the passion that you saw upstairs tonight, this decision wasn't made lightly. I believe that it reflects our commitment to fiscal responsibility, transparent governance, and practical solutions that best serve our community's long-term interests. This is about responsible leadership when it matters most. I believe you saw a board tonight that chose practical solutions over grand promises, careful planning over rushed decisions, and building something that will serve our community for decades to come. I believe that's what this community elected us to do. Our community deserves leadership and leaders who will make the difficult decisions that you saw tonight. And you saw the vigorous conversations around those and the questions of the different participants tonight. This community deserves leaders who will make difficult decisions based on facts, not on emotions or politics. Today's vote, I believe, reflects a commitment to transparency, responsible governance, and that puts the residents first. As you saw tonight, the action by the board was threefold. So there was a rejection of the $125 million GMP3, which, remember, that's the final construction package that would be needed to take the next step at the Crown Event Center. The next action that was taken by the board was to discontinue the project, the Crown Event Center project, and terminate the contracts with the project partners. And the last action that you saw the board take was to direct our county manager to begin to look at an RFQ, so a request for qualifications or development framework around renovation for the Crown Arena and the Crown Theater, which we heard about tonight. So those were the three actions that came out of it. I will tell you, and I'm sure I will get the question, what comes of the parking lot, the former courthouse parking lot. I will say that we will look at development opportunities. We have not discussed this as a board, but I believe that we'll look at development opportunities both from a private sector as well as potentially maybe a public-private opportunity as well. Just to answer that question before that is asked. So at this time, I will go ahead and open it up for questions. The best I can answer, understanding that I just walked out of the board meeting as well. But I feel that this was important to do. I know you all sat through the meeting, but I think it's important that if you have additional questions, that I can answer them to the best of my ability, or I have Ms. Rice here who will ensure you get the information that you requested. I know one of the questions is probably around, we'll make sure you have access to the documentations that have been requested previous, and our communications department will ensure that you get access to that as well.
Sure, then here, my first question for you is there's a lot of individuals, especially business owners in the downtown area, they're disappointed by Sykes' decision. What is your message then and the future of Grand Mountain development when it comes to the county?
I think our county remains committed to a vibrant downtown Fayetteville. Remember, Fayetteville is the county seat. There's a lot of other municipalities across this. So when we look at, the renovation project that you'll see out at the Crown Event Center now, as that begins to move forward based on, requests for qualifications, there's continued investment there and economic growth that we can put into a commerce corridor that's already been established for many years that we can ensure that we grow. I think if you look back over the many years in downtown Fayetteville, there's been substantial amount of public investment, whether it's in a Segra Stadium or whether it's in a parking deck or several other projects, well, 2 parking decks actually, or several other projects that have been invested in the downtown with public tax dollars. I don't want the downtown, and my business is downtown, and so is some of the other commissioners. I don't want the business community, I don't want the downtown community to believe that the county does not believe in the viability of downtown. This is clearly, you heard the deliberations around tonight, the cost of this, and the other factors that led into the vote. This is not an indicator whether we believe in our downtown or not believe in our downtown. The downtown of whether it's Fayetteville or the downtown, a Spring Lake that's trying to revitalize their downtown, or a Hope Mills that's trying to revitalize their downtown, or Stedman. We have multiple communities that have downtowns. They're the heart of any municipality or city. And as a county, we need to ensure that we can, help all of them and lift them up in a way that they can be vibrant in a way. Understanding that this is a seat, I want the downtown business owners, property owners, champions, advocates for downtown to know that the county is not walking away from them.
One more question for you really quickly. It is the mic, sorry. As far as numbers go in and the cost savings with this, you had a report, a proposal given to you, the commissioners, by an architect that basically outlined what the renovations would look like between the theater and the arena, the Crown Expo or the Crown Center out there. What is the cost savings based off that architectural proposal versus the cost estimate for the actual Crown Event Center downtown? What does that cost estimate look like?
So
savings.
And thank you. So I think when you heard some of that conversation tonight, I think you have to look at which version you want to do, and then you had 2 different, a theater and arena, so there wasn't really an economies of scales if it was looked at together. I think that's why we directed the county manager to go ahead and look at an RFQ so we can get better refinement on what we believe a cost would be, and in some other ways, it also allows the board to have some deliberation to say, what do we want to spend there? But when you look at a downtown project, there was a lot of talk whether the parking deck was attached to this project or not, whether it was needed or not. But the fact remains that it's a $33 million. I'll just use that, not the $46 million. Plus, now we heard tonight $152 million. So $153 million. So, you're pushing $190 million. If you have to factor in the parking deck with this, and I'm not saying it's part of the project, but what we heard tonight from our staff is that they are connected in a way. And if you go back and you look at the RFQ that was done on the parking deck, it actually mentioned the Crown Event Center.
Okay. So with the modernization and renovation of the Crown Theater and Arena, at 2,400 seats, it's $132.9 million. At 3,000 seats, it's $163.7 million. Would you calculate the sunk cost in the current downtown lot into that? What's been done, the $35 million into that?
Great question. So, and I think that's why I think I specifically asked about the what had been encumbered. I think that's part of what the conversations that we'll have with our staff now to better understand that. We know that that's going to there are dollars spent. We're going to have to look at how that is funded, as you heard tonight, potentially from general fund, from fund balance. There's a lot of options to do that. Whether it can get rolled into future debt, that's a legal question that we'll have to, with the LGC, that we'll have to explore. But quite frankly, if there's a development activity that happens there, in some ways it's the site work's done and there's some preliminary work on a development that's already done, if there is another development that happens there.
And so another point of hesitation that was brought up a few times is, you know, the Board of Commissioners and the county has been working on this event center downtown, but there's other issues in Cumberland County that need to be addressed: school infrastructure, water. But the money that's being used for the new Crown Event Center is limited. It can only be used for certain things, and those things do not include water or school infrastructure. So can you explain why that was brought into the conversation from your point of view, if that was something that you considered, or if you would like to speak for the whole board?
Yeah, again, I'm going to speak as a chairman, not as my personal, I'm trying to give you chairman's views as the board. I think that was part of the questions we had from an overall debt capacity and ability to bandwidth to do these types of projects. We'd already seen delays in this project already, but I think it was more of a question around the cost of those F&B dollars. So you heard our manager talk about $185 million of total capacity of what we could do with that F&B dollars. So we're going to use all of that for this Crown Event Center. Are there other options? And there are a lot of different ways that you can use the F&B dollars based on the session law and as it's laid out. Are there different things that you can do with it from a tourism standpoint or other things? So do we want to put all our eggs in one basket? And I kind of equated, do we want to max out our food and beverage tax credit card on one project? And I think that's part of some of the concerns and conversation that I heard from the board, and I think you heard some of that tonight.
All right, one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
I spent a lot of time talking to every single commissioner, except for Commissioner Council, but everyone seemed to have known where they stood coming into this meeting, and I asked you many, many times trying to get that. Was your decision made in this meeting tonight? Was it, what was the timeline on your decision? Because, Commissioner Patel had told me that it was something that he needed to see all these numbers first. But what was your motion going into tonight? How did you feel?
So I tend to make decisions on facts. I try to take the emotions out of it. Personally, I thought it was important that we saw all the information. We allowed the board to ask every question and understand every piece of information, and that came back really Monday. And so we're able to delve down into that. For me, really the decision came today, a final decision. I could move back and forth and see different pros and cons. I have gotten a lot of information about this project from previous commissioners as well as the staff. And I think for me, that decision and that decision point came today. And really, I wanted to hear deliberation. Quite frankly, the statement that I read tonight, I had two statements. It's kind of like when you run for office. You got one when you're going to win and your concession speech. And I literally wrote two kind of comments to say, one, we're moving forward, and one, we wouldn't, based on the general kind of comments that we had, not knowing where the full board would go. For me, that decision was made over today, and it was finalized today, and then it was confirmed to me in the meeting. A point in the meeting, personally, that gave me a lot of pause is we never really clarified that parking deck. Whether it's part of, because it's a cost, and if we're going to have it, it's $33 million that, if it can't be funded through F&B, is funded through general operations, which gets back to that 15% of our total capacity. So for me, it's about ensuring we're prioritizing, my decision was really made this afternoon, final, and then through the deliberations that we had tonight.
One quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. Talking about having all of those F&B dollars in one basket, is there anything pressing that you want to see that money used for now that you have freed it up?
I think that's a board conversation. I mean, when you look at our strategic planning, which everything should start with our board strategic planning, that we came together and we coalesced around a plan, agreed to a plan. I mean, there are things like the number one thing from an amenity in this community was not an event center. It was an aquatic center. So do we have the ability to do things like a regional aquatic center? Does that drive tourism? Is a way that we can legally use those dollars to do that? That may be one example. I think we can do some renovation and modernization to the two facilities at the Crown that we can use that for. And again, it's capacity that we have, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it.
Sure. I know one other concern that I heard this evening is, what kind of precedent does this set, in your opinion? Deciding to change course midstream on a major downtown project like the Crown Event Center.
Precedent as far as what?
As deciding to break ground to move forward with one phase of a project and then decide not to move forward with essentially the third phase.
So from day one, as we talked about this project, I talked about this board doing their due diligence. I think, and you heard a little bit tonight, I walked through the timeline. It was a pretty accelerated timeline towards the end of last year, moving into a new board. And you heard that. I think that speaks to the planning. When this board came in, 3 new members, the largest rotation of a board in recent history. We said, and I was very clear, we were going to be transparent. We need to do our due diligence on the scope of this. Again, a perfect example. Do we need the parking deck? Do we not need the parking deck? So there were a lot of questions that surrounded this project, from the planning, from the scope. Then we ran into a little situation that we needed to address, and so we took a pause. But through all that, the sentiment was that we were going to do our due diligence. So I hope the precedent that it sets is that you have a board that is committed to doing what's in the best interest of the taxpayers of this community, that we're going to be responsible with your tax dollars, whether they're your property tax dollars or the tax dollars that you pay when you go to a restaurant for food and beverage, that we're going to be held accountable for our actions, and that we're going to be transparent. And through this entire process, that's what we've done. So if I can set a precedent, or this board can set a precedent, that's the precedence that we're setting. I think you're going to see that as we move through this budget process, because there's going to be a lot of hard discussions in this budget process. How do we prioritize? What do we do? And if we keep this same value set, I think we'll be very successful as a board. My hope is that we can continue to have those conversations in a mutually respectful way.
Chairman Devier, I got one more question for
Sure.
you. When it comes now to putting money into the Crown Theater and Arena, talk about the area around it. That was brought up tonight about the drugs and not having hotels and things like that. Does the county or does your administration plan on implementing any funding to help build that area as it stands now to make it more suitable for an event center?
I think I'll point back to the strategic plan. So we talked about how do we build these areas of commerce. You've got a perfect opportunity, and I talked about this in my State of the Community as well, that came out of that strategic plan. When you look at that Crown complex, we've got an entertainment center there. You couple it with, you look at tourism, and you begin to look at sports tourism, and you begin to look at things like an aquatic center that's regionally, and has the competition ability. You can begin to create an areas of commerce. It's where we focus, and where we focus our economic developers and say, we want to do these things. And that should speak through our budget. So as you begin to see our budget deliberations, you should see those types of things, that We're going to make the investments in economic development. We're going to make the investments in how do we acquire sites? How do we begin to shape the sites that are here to be able to grow from an economic standpoint? Do we need to put some things in place on, we have some actions against one of the hotels that's out there now. There are some things that we need to continue to do. But if we make the investments, we can continue to recruit the type of industry, the type of commerce that we want in that area. And I'll tie it right back to what I said in my State of the Community. If you're looking long-term, you're right next to the airport. We do the same thing with the airport. We create that area of commerce. And hopefully, the way this community is working, I-685 will come down 87, which is a natural path through there. So now we've got 295, you've got 95, you've got I-65, I-685 tied together if we invest now. Think about if we had made this investment 20 years ago and focused on that area. Think about the Lenovo Center. Think about the areas that you see in Atlanta. They're outside the urban center, but they create an environment for arts and entertainment, and sports entertainment. We have that opportunity.
Do you have any concern over any legality issues coming out of stopping this, either with contractors, architects, anybody who has been involved with that, or any concern that the county could look like a bad actor for pulling out of this project pretty far into it, going into the final construction package?
So I think this is actually, if you're going to do it, it's the optimal time to do it. So if you remember when I talked about this next step would commit over 85% of the dollars to this project. If you're going to stop a project for whatever reason, this is, in my opinion, the time to do it. I think it shows responsibility. I think it shows a sense of ensuring the project is on track to do what it's supposed to do. As far as the legal realm, we've had some questions previously to our attorney about our contracts. And of course, during that pause, there was some review of our contracts and scopes. I'll leave that to the legal team and Diane to kind of answer any of the specifics on the contracts. But they're pretty standard contracts as far as opt-out and termination clauses in each one of them. But I'll let our attorney work his way through that. Anything else? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know it's been a long evening. Please, if you have additional questions after you leave here, or you need follow-up interviews with myself or another commissioner, please reach out to Diane, and she'll be glad to help you. And again, as I talked about, the information that I know some of you are looking for Monday night, we'll make sure that's provided as well. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your partnership to help us make sure that we get factual information out. Thank you.